Kathy at Northstar Prepsteader. Well, it's time to start getting the beans ready for canning. Now it's a bit of a process, especially when I have 10 pounds of beans like I have right now. So it's evening and I'm gonna get started on cutting them and cleaning them. I like to do them all at one time, get them all cleaned and ready to go so that when I'm ready to can, they're all there. I'm gonna show you my first steps tonight. Okay, I've dumped one of the bowls into the sink. I have some kind of lukewarm to cool water with a little bit of apple cider vinegar in there to help get some of the dirt off of them, if there's anything there. I've got my other two bowls waiting to go, but I just want to do one at a time. I've done it before where I fill both sinks completely full with all the beans and it's a little overwhelming, but anyway. So as I go through, I clean them, I cut the ends off. The ends just go into here, and this is really great food for your chickens, or it can go in your compost, whichever one you have, but chickens absolutely love these ends of the beans. Once this bowl is full, I will then pause and then cut those up. I'll put them in a bowl and then they'll go in the fridge because I'm not going to be up canning it tonight. I'll probably do the canning tomorrow, but if I can get these cut tonight, that'll be great. So I will show you my process now as I do it. So I'm cleaning the beans, making sure that there's no blossoms stuck to it or dirt or other things that could have flown in and gotten stuck, or even cobwebs on here. Also, if there are any chewed spots or any bad spots in here, I cut those out. I know you can just snap the ends off, but you know what? For me, that takes off too much of the ends. So I like to cut the ends off. Now, this particular end you certainly don't have to cut off if you don't want to. I'll show you a little bit closer here. You wouldn't have to cut that end off, but this one has the blossom on it. And when you go to can it, that can end up rotting in your jar. So you want to make sure that that end is taken off. So I have nice clean ends here on my beans. Now like this one has a little spot right in here. Now whether it's a defect or a bug or whatever, it doesn't really matter. What I don't want is that processing with my canning stuff. So I'm just gonna take my knife and just cut out a little piece there. Because I chop these up, that doesn't really matter. I never notice it in my food. But I don't want those going through my canning jars because it can ruin an entire jar of beans. Overall, these beans are looking really, really good. It took me maybe 10 or 15 minutes to trim this amount of beans. For me, I like to do these in kind of small batches. It helps to break up the monotony of doing the same activity over and over again. And I feel like I'm accomplishing more, actually. So I have another bowl here, an empty one. So I like to grab 4 or 5 of these beans. Now typically beans are curled a little bit. You rarely see them just perfectly straight. So I kind of have them going all the same direction. And then I cut them in about 1-inch pieces. And if I do several at a time, it helps to go faster. And then I just take these, put them in my bowl, and I grab another set. Now, if you have some beans that are like really, really fat, you want to have them a little shorter when you cut them, so they're not such a big chunk when you go to eat them. So you can see the pieces and the sizes. When I do several at a time, it makes the job go quicker rather than doing one bean at a time. If you have somebody else that can help you with this, that really saves some time, because one person can be trimming, another person can be cutting these up, and that saves some time and makes the whole process go much quicker. So it'll only take me a few minutes to go through this bowl, and then I'll continue trimming. As you're cutting them, if you come across any other pieces of blossoms or anything, any dirt or anything on these, it gives you a second chance to be able to make sure that they're good and clean, because again, you do not want that in your jars when you're canning, because that can add bacteria to your canning jar, which then can make your jar go bad and you lose all that produce. Hey everybody, I'm back in the kitchen. I got all the beans cut. I actually did them about a day and a half ago. It did take me about 4 hours. I was up till about 3 in the morning cutting beans. And yesterday just demanded a lot of other things from me. So they've been in the refrigerator cut for a day and a half, which is totally fine. I've even left them in the refrigerator for like 4 or 5 days. So that works really well too. Sorry, my voice is a little bit scratchy this morning. So anyway, we are gonna get ready to can. Okay, this is what I stored my beans in. You can see they're all cut. And then I had a little bit of extra and overflow, so that's probably another quart. Normally I would let them sit out and get room temperature, but because of my time frame today and my schedule, I just don't have that luxury. But this is okay. We're gonna work with some cold beans, and I'll show you how to do that. Getting my supplies out and getting all prepped. Have my jars that I've stored. You know, back in the day, we used to be able to get our jars in a full cardboard box, which makes it great for storing, because then I can stack them. I like to store them upside down, so then I don't get, you know, spiders and extra dust and things like that in there. But I'm still gonna wash them. So I'm gonna start taking them out. Okay, because I know that I have a good 9 quarts of beans here, I'm gonna need at least 18 pints, because that's how I can them in pints. So that one box was 12, and I'll need this extra box too. These that would come with the covers and the lids already attached, I have just kept them in here stored just for future use. If my rings start rusting and I need some more, I have access to those. So see how nice it is to have these boxed. Nowadays they come with just the plastic top, because I know they're trying to save on paper, but tell you what, it makes it really hard to store them. So I'm gonna start washing these up and rinsing really, really well. I do have this bottle washer, which I use to really get down in there and make sure that they're really clean. However, when I do store them, I make sure that they're very clean too. A couple other tools that I'm gonna need is, of course, my funnel. I was blessed to be able to get a stainless steel one last year, and I've really, really enjoyed it, but plastic works just fine. I have this plastic jar thing that it goes down into the jars to help release the bubbles, and I'll show you how to use that. I've had that also for 25 years. They have things that are a little different now, like how to measure little notches in here that will measure like your head space and everything, but I like this one. It works well for me. The other thing to get ready and prepare, of course, is your canner. This is just a single layer canner. It's a Miro brand. What you want to do is double check your gaskets. There's this little rubber gasket, and I did replace that a while ago, and so it looks really, really good. The other gasket is your ring here. This is the inside of the little red one. You want to make sure that the edges aren't starting to chip away and corrode and everything, so make sure that that's good. Also, the little gasket here for release, you want to make sure that that one's good. And then of course your main gasket. I have replaced this once in 25 years, and it's still really, really great. They're easy to find, the replacement parts. Okay, and in my canner, I've got the base here that the jars rest on. You never want to have your pressure canning jars resting on the very bottom, so they need that space here for the pressure to be able to build and to cook. So I've got these all ready to go. Okay, all my jars are washed. I did wash up 2 dozen jars because I'm going to need at least 1.5 dozen. So they're all clean, sterile, ready to go. I also want to wash any of my other equipment pieces here because they've been sitting around for a little while, and you just want everything as clean as possible going into your jars. I also like to wash my lids just so that they're ready to go. This one had 4 left in there. This box is 12, but this is a good brand, and you just want to make sure that the rubber is really good. So I'm going to wash those real quick. And a few more in here. Now I've just been storing my rings in bags inside of my water bath canner. It's just been easy access to get to them. I had tried to keep them separate, the wide mouth and the regular mouth, but as you can see, I have them all everywhere and mixed up. But I need to get the rings out. Even though these have been washed, I still like to wash them again, just if there's dust or anything that's accumulated over the last year on these. Just like to get them clean. And the last thing I'm going to wash is this jar lifter. And yes, Zach, this is the way you hold it. The little rounded areas go around the jars to grab it, and especially with the rubberized here so that you don't drop the jars. Okay, all my rings are washed, my equipment's washed, my lids are washed, I have them in a pan. Now I know that these new rings are made so that you don't have to sterilize them, you don't have to get them hot, but I just find that they stick better if I do that. So I guess mostly I guess some of the old school in me is coming out. I still like to do that. One of the reasons I do wash the lids is because I don't know who's been handling them in manufacturing or in the packaging of them or something like that. And so just to make sure I don't have bacteria going into the jars, I just do that. It's just me. Because I'm gonna cold pack these jars, which means that I'm gonna put the beans they're just, they haven't been pre-cooked. So I'm just gonna cold pack them, put them in the jars. But I still need to add hot water to the jars so that they can be tempered for when they're in the canner and the canner starts. So in order to do that, I have to have hot water. And because I have a full canner, it's going to take a bit of hot water. I do have two sources of using hot water. One is just having a pot here with purified water. And you got to make sure that you're using really, really good water. Don't use city water. So this is going to take a while to come to a boil. So I want to get it started now. Now that is not going to be enough for the jars. So the other item I have is an electric kettle. I got this a couple years ago on Cyber Monday from Amazon. It was a really, really good deal, and I tell you what, I have absolutely loved it because it heats up so fast, especially if I run out and I need to get some more. It'll heat up so quickly. Now to prepare my canner, first of all I want to make sure that it's sitting square on the burner here, and it's kind of helps to have this rack in here because I can look at this as a center either way, and that really helps. Now always go by the guidelines of your canner. You can see I've used this so much I've had to put it in plastic. That's fruits, and here's veggies. Now here it's going to tell me how much water I need to put in here. I have it all circled and highlighted for what I normally do. So I have to add an extra pint if I'm not at full capacity. Well, this is going to be full capacity, which is 10 pints. And that's really squeezing it in there. So I need to put 2 quarts of water in here. And that I can just use regular tap water. This is a 2-cup measure, and so I'll use 4 of these. Okay, I've got my water in here. Now I'm going to add a glug of just some white vinegar. Just about that much. What that does, especially here when I've got hard water. Now if I don't do that and put the vinegar into the canner, it gets a white film around the outside of the jars. And this white film is really, really hard to get off. I mean, it really doesn't ever come off. So putting a little vinegar in there helps to prevent that. Okay, I'm going to turn the heat on this just down to low. I like to get the water in here really warm, if not hot, before I start putting the jars in so that there's no shock with them. And I've got the heat going under the water and under the lids. Okay, I just plugged in my electric kettle. It's got the light on here that says keep warm. But to actually heat it, put the lever down. It's got a little red light on it. Indicates that it's heating up. Now this will heat up really quickly. Okay, the last thing I do to prepare is to run a sink full of hot water and put my jars in here. I want to lay them so that they fill up with water, and I found that this is a really good direction to have them. We need 10 jars. My hot water is at about 145 degrees. which is a little bit hotter than most people keep theirs. Then I'm going to add rings, 2, 4, 6. So these are hot too. And I'm going to fill the sink up to cover everything very, very well and let the jar start getting hot. Because the air conditioning has been running, and as the jars sit out, they get cool. And then I start putting the boiling water in them. I don't want to have them crack. So this is my way of tempering them, getting the glass ready for the hot water, and it works really well for me. Okay, the watering mat kettle is ready to go, so I can just flip it off and it'll stay warm. The water on the stove is not quite ready, but it should be by the time I'm done using the water in the kettle. The lids already came to a boil and I've turned that heat off. Alright, preparation is done. We are ready to get going on this. I like to do a few jars at a time. Now because I'm putting cold beans in here, I want to put a little bit of the hot water in here first while the jars are still warm, just to help temper the jars so that I don't have any cracking going on. Okay, I'm going to start loading them in here. Now green beans calls for a 1/2 inch head space. So I guess I've been doing this long enough I can kind of eyeball it, see where my 1/2 inch is. Generally, I kind of, my rule of thumb is up to the bottom rim of the jar, which is maybe it's more like 5/8 of an inch, but so I can have that maybe go over a little bit there. So I've got 4 jars here. Now I want to add some salt. The salt also aids in the preservation, but if you have salt issues, you know, certainly reduce the amount. It calls for 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm using pink Himalayan salt here. But you could reduce it to 1/4 teaspoon if you have salt issues. I have tried canning it with no salt, and I mean, they still last, but they don't taste very good at all. And I'm just going to fill this up with water from here. The other thing with this is that it makes it so easy to pour. Got those water levels up to about 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to take this tool. I don't even remember what it's called, but I move it along the edges of this. I don't want to go down the center because I don't want to damage any beans. You can see that the color is already turning bright green in the boiling water. This helps to get any bubbles out that may have gotten trapped. Any air that could get trapped inside the beans when you pour the water in. It's amazing what does get trapped, and I have seen that before. So okay, this one could probably use just a little bit more water. Otherwise, they look really good. The next thing you want to do is wipe off the rims of the jars. Now some people use vinegar and different things. I just use these cloths. The brand name is Norwex. I don't know if you can see that right here. Norwex, they're antibacterial cloths. This one is a dishcloth and it's wet, so I'm just getting off, like, if there's any salt or bean residue or anything like that. Just wiping that off. And then this is a towel that's dry. So just getting the rims dry. To me, that's really, really important in how well it seals, is to have that dry. Okay. And then these lids. So I've got this little lid lifter. It's a magnet on the bottom, and I can lift that out without burning my fingers. And what I do, because this is an antibacterial and it's sterile, I just try to gently dry that, and these lids just like stick like crazy. Yeah, the magnet's working really well. You want it to be just finger tight. ready to put into my canner. Let's see if I can take you along here. So in my canner, I can see little bubbles in the water, so things are starting to warm up in there. Also at this point, this water is boiling, so I'm actually going to just turn it down, so that's ready to go, and I'm going to refill my kettle. Since I'm going to use the water from the pot here, ladle full of water, it's so much more convenient to have the kettle. And I already filled the kettle. Some people like to smash their beans all down. I don't really like to do that. First of all, I know how much I'm getting in each pint, and it's plenty of food for me. 1 pint will give me 2 meals worth of vegetables, and so I don't want to smash the food. It can damage it. Then it's harder to get the air bubbles out, all that kind of. If you overfill them with water, no worries. You just take a spoon and scoop out some until you get to the level that you need to be at. What will happen is if you put too much water in here, other than what they recommend, in the pressure canning process, it will, because it boils, it'll end up breaching your seal, the lid, the ring. It'll start coming out of that, and so not only do you lose water, but you end up getting food on your rim. Between that and the lid, it will either not seal or it will be a bad seal and possibly rot in the future. So make sure you leave the recommended amount of headspace in here. Now when using used rings, if they are really rusty or bent or anything like that, throw them away. Do not use them because that will affect your seal. Alright, my canner is full. I have 10 jars in there. I've been kind of warming it up, so now I'm going to turn the gas on to high. There's no real right or wrong way for the direction of your lid. However, I do like to have this little button gasket here, over here, so if by some chance, now in 25 years it's never blown, but if for some reason it would go into the stove hood and not towards me or out towards anybody. So you want to make sure that this cover is on nice and tight. So you got to make sure your gasket's in here. Now this has all of these notches that have to line up where it sets and rests down, and then turn it so that these line up here, because in here is the little locking mechanism that will lock this shut so that nobody can open it while it's under pressure. And this is your little pressure valve. Okay, once I put the weighted gauge on, it'll start to jiggle. I let it go for a minute or two so it can get used to that pressure, and then I will start turning the temperature down. Okay. Let's turn the heat down a little bit. So I want the canner to get used to it at that level. So I will turn it down a little bit by bit. Ultimately, you want the weight to be jiggling 1 to 4 times a minute, not constantly running. If it's running like this, your pressure is way too high and you're going to blow the lids off the jars. To make sure I set my timer for 20 minutes for the beans. Now because this is a very full canner, the temperature is going to take longer to adjust because everything is so hot in there. You don't want to bring it down too far too fast, but you can hear it starting to slow down a little bit. Okay, my timer has gone off. So I turn the heat off and just let the canner sit until the pressure releases. Now once it releases, this little locking mechanism, see right there, that's what's connecting the covers there. That has to release. Also, right now, if I were just to touch the weight, there would be pressure that would be releasing. But once the pressure is dissipated, if I touch that and it doesn't do anything, then I can remove it and loosen the cover. Because it's a very full canner, it's going to take a while for it to come on down. The locking mechanism has released. And I always use a hot pad in dealing with this because this is very hot weight. And there's no pressure being released, so I can take that off. So now I'm going to turn the cover. It's hot, so I don't want to handle it with my bare hands. There's hot water coming off there and steam. I'm going to let the jars sit just for a few minutes so they can kind of temper, get used to the cooler air out here. Okay, you take your jar lifter and put it right underneath the rim of the jar. Pull snugly, and you're lifting your jar out. And I have a wooden cutting board to set them on. You want to leave a little bit of space between the jars so air can flow through them and help them cool down. So some of the jars were already starting to seal and ping while they were in the canner, but as they cool down now, the rest will seal up. So the jars are going to have to sit for 12 hours. You don't disturb them, don't touch the lids or the rings or anything, or move them around, pick them up and look at them. You want to leave them alone for 12 hours. At least, sometimes even up to 24, but 12 hours is the time frame you need. Otherwise you could disturb the seal. Another one just pinged. You don't want to disturb the seal on it. Now if there's anything after 12 hours that has not sealed shut, put it in the refrigerator and use it within 4 or 5 days or so. Otherwise they are all cooked, and when they're cooled down after 12 hours, I will take the rings off of them, wash the jars down. I always do that because I'm still pinging. See, you can hear them. In the past, when I've had jars that I have not washed, because in the process you can get some food and some different things on there, especially where it's under the rings. And if you take the rings off, if they sit on the shelf long enough, you know, a year or whatever, they can develop some mold around there, around the outside of the jar. So I just wash them down, dry them off, label them, and store them on my shelves. You guys, thank you so much for coming along with me with canning my first batch of green beans for the year. There's 10 jars here. That's a canner load for pints. I think it holds 7 quarts, but I just can the pints. I still have a lot of green beans that I have cut and prepared, so I'm gonna do a whole nother batch. So you guys take care, God bless. Hope your canning goes well. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave those below. If you've never subscribed to my channel, I sure would appreciate that. And then hit that notification bell so that you can be notified in the future for new videos. Take care, God bless, always have hope.